welcome to Podfic Galore. I'm your horrible online reader, Grossgasteiger. I read out loud fanfiction for you busy bees, free of charge and no strings attached. Today, I will continue reading the Silmarillion/Lord of the Rings fic by Bloodwing Blackbird from Archive of Our Own called And Now Each Night I Count the Stars. I hope you can at least try to enjoy my voice, and I will try my best for you with the equipment available to me. Note, this fic is rated explicit. On with the show. As Halbarad and Aragorn hunted, just the two of them, taking it in turns to bend close to the ground to examine a bent stick or to sniff at a pile of scat, Halbarad finally began to feel more at ease. Do you know why Gandalf is so concerned with this creature? Aragorn had his cheek almost to the ground as he laid fingers gently into depressions in the ground that may have been a track, but was probably not. Halbarad scanned the horizon and saw naught but a hawk hovering on an updraft. It concerns his halfling friend. It seems that he met the creature during their travels with the dwarves. Gandalf seems to think it means his friend harm. That seemed very much like the sort of half-story that Halbarad was used to hearing from the wizard. He would tell you no more. The hawk folded its wings and dropped to the ground. Halbarad could hear the cry of something small. Aragorn looked up. I know a bit more of the story, but no more of his suspicions. He stood and brushed a piece of grass from his beard. This is fruitless. If the creature came this way, it was long ago. I think it has gone east. Back to the mountains, maybe? Perhaps. He looked to the sky where the sun was the merest hint of brightness behind the thick clouds. We'll have snow tonight. Let us find somewhere that we can be out of the wind. In the lee of a small hillock, they built a bivouac of their cloaks and took shelter within. The snow came before they were able to build a fire, so they contented themselves with a dinner of nuts and cured meat. Aragorn had a small flask of miruvor. Having nothing else to do, they shared the remaining sips of the cordial and talked. The conversation was mostly of small things they had seen on their travels, those they had met. Halbarad told a bawdy story that he had heard at the inn in Calm. Aragorn sang a song that he had learned during his travels in Far Harad. As oft happened, their conversation soon turned to their current concerns. Where will you go now? Asked Halbarad. For now, I think we should go to Rivendell. It may be that I will continue east from there, although it will be some months before I can attempt to cross the mountains. If you would. It won't be long from here. It is good to warm up sometimes. Of course. The warmth is what you enjoy about Rivendell. Halbarad shoved his elbow into Aragorn's side. I don't see that you need me tagging along on your courting. Come with me, Halbarad. I'd be glad of the company. We'll part ways again soon enough, I expect. Halbarad sighed. He would have agreed anyway. A bed was a nice thing, on occasion. Well, I suppose we shall learn what is to be done with Maglor. It is likely. You don't sound eager to see our new friend again. He is not what you'd call a cheerful company, is he? Aragorn laughed at that. I don't believe he has spent much time in any sort of company for a great many years. You've become suspicious. One of us should be, Halbarad said, with more force than he meant to. You don't like him, do you? Halbarad stared at him. Do you? I don't expect he's attempting to be likable. If he was, then he had gone about it very strangely, in Halbarad's opinion. More to the point, I don't trust him. Don't you think it a bit queer? If he is who we believe him to be, and he has stayed hidden for all this time, then why would he show himself now? Would you not say that he was found? By us? Surely his own people have looked for him at some point in the last 2 ages. If we found him, it's because he decided to be found, or because he found us. That being the case, I think we should ask why. Aragorn considered this. Whatever the truth, I shall be interested to see what he and Elrond have to say to each other. Yes, what was it Eberhard said? Are you so afraid of one who was once as a son to you? He folded his arms against the cold and passed the bottle back to Aragorn. Do you know that story? I know a bit about the stones, but I'm a bit confused as to where your lady love's father comes into the whole thing. I know parts of it, at least. Aragorn knew most stories. Halbarad supposed it was a side effect of his upbringing. Halbarad settled in, content to listen. He knew parts of the story himself, but he had never given the attention to the old songs that some did. They were long, and more often than not, Halbarad's attention would wander. Meeting a character out of one of them gave them a bit more interest. Fëanor, eldest son of Finwë, was a great craftsman. At the dawn of the world, he created 3 great jewels, the Silmarils, wherein was captured the light of the 2 trees of Valinor. The stones were stolen by the great enemy. Fëanor and his sons, that's where our new friend enters the story, swore an oath that they would recover the Silmarils from any that would seek to keep them, be they kinsman or foe. They pursued him to Middle-earth. Many evils were done along the way, even unto the slaying of kin. One of the stones was eventually taken from him, not by the sons of Fëanor, but by Beren and Luthien, a tale I'm certain you know. Halbarad did indeed. It was probably Aragorn's favorite story. When word reached the sons of Fëanor that a Silmaril was in Doriath, they attacked the city, but failed to retake the stone. Elwing, daughter to Dior, survived, and with others of Doriath settled at the havens of Sirion, where many of the survivors of the city of Gondolin were also. She wedded Erendil the mariner, and bore him the sons Elrond and Elros. The sons of Fëanor again attacked, killing many of those who had fled there. Elwing cast herself into the sea, leaving her sons behind. Of the sons of Fëanor, only Maedhros and Maglor remained. Maglor took the boys Elrond and Elros into his own dwelling. It is said that he raised them as if they were his children, and that they loved them, and that they grew to love him in return, however unlikely that may be. Halbarad made a sound of disbelief. It is said. Aragorn shrugged. I know not the truth of it, and if that is a question that you are willing to ask the Lord of Rivendell, well, you are braver than I. Halbarad snorted. He had not met Elrond face to face, and much of what he had heard was filtered through the lens of Aragorn's tense reverence. No, he'd not be interrogating the Lord of Rivendell any time soon. Aragorn went on. The other stones were recovered in a war of wrath when the great enemy was destroyed, and Beleriand was lost beneath the waves. Still bound by their oath, the 2 remaining sons of Fëanor stole the stones and slew their guards. It was the nature of the Silmarils that they would not abide an unclean touch. When the remaining sons of Fëanor laid hands upon the stones, they were burned, and they understood that through their foul deeds they had relinquished their claim upon the stones, and that their oath was doomed to remain unfilled. Maedhros, the eldest son of Fëanor, threw himself into a chasm of fire, and the stone was lost with him. Maglor, it is said, cast the Silmaril that he took into the sea, and that he wandered the shores thereafter, singing in regret. I hope you don't think that this tale has improved my opinion of him. If I had known all this when he was near to hand, well, I would have slept with my knife closer. That old thing? The handle would break if you use it for anything more vigorous than shaving. He plucked at Halbarad's beard, which had gone very bushy of late. Not that you've done that in recent memory. Mock my beard all you like, but leave my knife out of it, said Halbarad. I like the way it takes an edge. Well, said Aragorn, perhaps he was bored. Perhaps he, too, is seeking something. Forgiveness, maybe. I hope that you are right. Last of them all, eh? Halbarad settled himself into as comfortable spot as he could and closed his eyes. Sounds lonely, doesn't it? It was full night when the sons of Elrond reached Rivendell, Maglor stalking behind them. They had spent the recent days scrambling through snow and mud in the pathless lands, and Elladan, for one, barely rued their decision to continue through the wild rather than to return to the road earlier. They found their father in his library, where he and the hobbit, Bilbo, were poring over an untidy pile of documents. The hobbit had taken up residence in Rivendell some years ago, and seemed well pleased to spend his retirement translating old tales into common tongue. For his part, their father was buoyed by the hobbit's conviviality, and spent much more time indulging the little fellow's questions than Elladan had expected. Nay, curse is not quite the word. It should be more ambiguous. I think fate conveys the sentiment better. Ah, but I've already used fate in this quatrain, Master Elrond. What about destiny? Does that convey enough ambiguity for you? If you can make 3 syllables fit where you had 1, then you're a greater poet than... Elrond looked up then, at his sons hovering in his doorway, while Makler skulked about, out of sight in the hallway behind them, prodded at the carvings and tapestries. The smile Elrond gave to them had never quite shed its old sadness. The twins took after their mother. A moment, please, Mr. Baggins. Yes, of course, of course. Good night, Master Elrond. Bilbo hastily gathered his papers. As the old hobbit bustled past them, Illidan heard Makler speak up. Have you considered doom? Bilbo stopped in the hallway, caught off guard, no doubt, by the spark spectre haunting the cozy halls of Imladris, but he recovered quickly and snapped his fingers. That's it, exactly. My thanks, sir. And you are? Bilbo, Illidan prompted. Right. Good night, my lords. Bilbo disappeared down the hall, staring over his shoulder until he threatened to trip over a bench. Have you brought a guest, then, my sons? Elrond asked, a tension behind his words that made Illidan wonder if he had already recognized the voice. Elrohir glanced a look at Illidan, prompting him to begin the story. Indeed, said Illidan. We met with Aragorn and one of his kindred. They had come upon a harper in the village of Bree, and thought that we would wish to meet him. The fire in the room crackled. They were not wrong. Elrond studied the faces of his sons. Should I summon Lindir, or is this not an artistic concern? No. Eberhard glanced at the hall where Makler waited, trying not to look as if he was listening, if Illidan was any judge. Father, it's... He glanced at Illidan, then gave up and just waved Makler through the doorway. Quite the introduction. Thank you, Elros. Elrohir, he murmured, glancing at his brother, disquieted. Makler froze for a moment. Of course. My apologies. Elrond stared at Makler for a long time. You look well, he said at last. Makler smiled at that, an expression that sat uneasily on his lips. You shouldn't lie to me. You were never very good at it. Elrond laughed at that, but Illidan had never heard him sound less mirthful. Perhaps you should have taught me better. Where have you been? Here and there. It doesn't matter. Do you know what has... It wasn't often that the twins heard their father's voice so sharp. I will not be the one to ask, Makler. After all these years. You'd better spin a better tale. He began to clear his desk, rolling the scrolls and setting them neatly, if forcefully, to the side, shuffling his clutter from one pile to the next. Why did you come here now? It was hardly my idea. Illidan tried to think of something to say, but Elrond held up a hand. We will speak of this in the morning. He took a breath and turned his gaze to his sons. This is a poor welcome for you, my sons. If I may ask it, would you show the son of Fëanor to a room? In the North Hall, I think? Yes, there should be one prepared. Have Erestor send someone to him with refreshments. Someone he trusts. Someone from Eregion, maybe. Or someone young. You understand, of course. Erestor is not to go himself, under any circumstance. Tell him that, please. As usual, their father had closed his eyes, visualizing the list he was making, distracting himself with most immediate concerns. Makler watched all this, unmoving, but for his eyes. But he followed without objection, as Elrohir led him to the corridor. As Illidan closed the door, he saw Elrond slump into his chair, head in his hands. Halbarad and Aragorn reached Rivendell with no further delay and with no sign of the creature. Having veered south in their search, they decided to return to the road, for the weather had continued foul, and the going was easier than in the fens and woody places. Despite their detour, they reached Rivendell only a day after the twins. It was twilight as they rode into the valley, the snow finally passing, and as the sun set, her rays escaped beneath a heavy blanket of clouds to paint the columns of Rivendell with red light and turn the many windows to gold. It had been several years since Halbarad had last visited Rivendell, but it remained as marvelous as it had been in his memory, warm and sheltered even as winter crept about the tops of the circling hills, laced with swift, clear waters and redolent with birdsong and the scent of pines. They were greeted by the curious figure of a halfling bundled up, nose to toes, in warm robes. Aragorn had mentioned Gandalf's friend who had recently taken up residence in Rivendell, the source of all their fruitless hunting. The little fellow had already seemed to regard himself as integral part of the household, a welcoming committee extempore. He sat on one of the porches with a cup of something steaming to hand and a brazier near his fuzzy feet. Dunadan, what a delight to see you! Elladan and Elrahir said you were traveling this way, but we did not hope to see you so early. He gestured at his comforts. As you can see, I had settled myself in for quite a pleasant wait. Well, then we are sorry to have disturbed you, Aragorn laughed. We had hoped to meet with a friend, but it seems we missed our chance. Bilbo looked up at him and tapped the side of his nose. You're a poor liar, Dunadan. Keep your secrets if you must, but introduce me to your friend. I don't think I've met this one yet. Aragorn gestured and Halbarad stepped forward. This is Halbarad, son of Halbaran, one of my kinsmen. A very distant one, Halbarad added, to forestall any questions about his ancestry. Aragorn was inclined to claim even the most teeniest connection as family. To the best of Halbarad's knowledge, he was a descendant of a proud line of Númenórean fishermen, and he highly doubted that Aragorn's storied forefathers would have looked twice at his own ancestors. Halbarad bent slightly to offer his hand, but Bilbo surprised him, jumping down from his seat to give him a short and serious bow. Bilbo Baggins, son of Bungo. I'm honored, said Halbarad. What of the others? Ah, the twins got back last night. Went straight to their father with your ominous-looking friend in tow. His bright eyes searched their faces, eager for news. It all seemed dreadfully serious. I don't suppose you can tell me where you stumbled across him. I'm writing a book, you know. I'm sure you'll hear enough content, even you, in time. I rather doubt it. They were keeping awfully close about it all. If Bilbo had been less polite, he would perhaps have grumbled. As it was, he restrained himself to a long-suffering sigh. But of course, I'm delaying you. I expect Master Elrond will want to know that you have arrived. I could take you to him. Bilbo's eyes twinkled with mischief. Are you feeling left out of secret councils, Bilbo? Aragorn chuckled. I'm certain we can find the way. Oh, very well. They were in his study, the one with the myrtle outside the window. You know the one, the last I saw them. Halbarad lagged behind as he followed Aragorn, distracted by a tapestry here, a bas-relief there, a chair in just the perfect place beside the hearth. He was having a very pleasant daydream of sitting there and thinking about absolutely nothing but the sounds of the fire made when he realized that he had lost track of Aragorn. He had been a guest in the last homely house once or twice, many years ago, but had seen the lord only in a distance, and had certainly never presumed to intrude upon his personal chambers. He continued the way he had been going, but in truth he was half hoping to get so woefully lost that he'd have an excuse to return to the porch. Bilbo had seemed a jolly enough fellow, undoubtedly better company than whatever it was he was about to walk into. As luck would have it, though, he came upon Aragorn just around the next corner, leaning against a sideboard carved with fruits and flocks of birds, a quirk on his lips, as if he knew exactly what Halbarad had been considering. It was a tense scene that greeted the rangers, as if disappointment had become a miasma, laying heavy on the room and tainting everything within. It seemed that the others had already spent many hours in speech, and none had found satisfaction, if there was a such thing to be had in whatever mess that had been made of their history. Maglor stared steadfastly through the window, not acknowledging the arrival of the rangers, rubbing the palms of his gloved hands as if they pained him. Elladan and Elrohir watched their father with grave concern as he greeted Aragorn and Halbarad. For his part, Elrond seemed committed to a display of unnatural cheer. Halbarad wasn't entirely certain who was meant to benefit from the performance. Men of the West, welcome. Did you find that which you sought? Aragorn answered for them. Not yet, Master Elrond. If it was ever in the north, it is no longer. If you wish, you may rest here a while before continue your journey. Elrond paused and seemed to accept that there was no graceful way to move forward. To the matter at hand. I have taken thought and we've talked much. Were his crimes only against myself, I would not hesitate to render my own judgment. But it has not been so, has it, Maglor? He didn't seem to expect a response. Maybe, Elrond's voice spiked rough over the words. If you had been more forthcoming about your doings of the last 2 ages, maybe if you pretend that you wish to amend things, well, you might be surprised how willingly forgiveness might be offered. I do not seek it. He didn't turn away from the window. Then do not wonder if I find it difficult to trust you, Elrond snapped, then calmed his voice with an effort. In any case, he return may have effects that I cannot foresee. Oft love and loyalty are twisted by the enemy to suit his own designs. He spoke pointedly to Maglor. Who should know this better than you and I? Maglor slid his gaze over to Elrond, and Halbarad, who did not fancy himself a fearful man, started looking for the nearest hole to crawl into. Elrond continued holding to his smile with determination that widened his knuckles. Therefore, I have summoned the members of my council to determine what is to be done with Maglor Feanorion. Whether they will respond, I do not know, but all will find it difficult to travel before spring. Until then, I must rely on my own discernment. He addressed the figure at the window. Maglor, much as my heart is glad to learn you still live, I cannot forget the grievous hurt that you have given to myself, to my family, to all of our people. It is my decision that you shall not walk free until the White Council may render its verdict. Neither shall you be detained. You may remain in Rivendell and the lands between the rivers and the mountains. If you wish to leave those lands, you may only do so in the company of the Dunedain or of my sons. Aragorn, Halbarad, do you accept this charge, both for yourselves and for your companions? We do, said Aragorn. Halbarad shrugged. It was hardly up to him in any case. Elrond turned back to Maglor. Son of Feanor, will you abide by these terms? If I say no, then you would be kept here, behind locks and under guard, if you make it necessary. Very well, then. He waved one of those graceful hands, as if the matter barely concerned him. I accept these terms. Will you abide by the decision of the council, even if they call for your death? Eagerly. And if they call for you to return to the west to face the judgment of the Valar? At that, Maglor looked away from the window. I cannot pass over the sea. That is no longer certain, said Elrond. Maglor scoffed. Ah, perhaps the Lord of Rivendell has gained power even over the will of Mandos. If one with such mastery commands it, who then I am to question? Elrond ignored the mockery in the words and folded his hands. It is decided. And so it was settled. Elrond would send messages to Galadriel in Lothlorien, to Círdan the shipwright at the Grey Havens, to Glorfindel, to Saruman, to Radagast, and to Gandalf the Grey. Together they would take counsel and decide what was to be done with Maglor, son of Feanor, who was thought to be lost. Meanwhile, Halbarad harbored a great and secret hope that he would not be summoned to that meeting. End of chapter 2. Stay tuned.